Hey all, I'm Vibhu, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Beta. And welcome to another episode of Founder Exchange. My guest today is Ray Lee, who is the founder of Scene Studio, and I've known him for a couple of years. He's been through the fire just like we have at Beta, like every founder does, and has stumbled upon really a truly amazing business in the custom fit apparel space. And so, welcome to the show, Ray.
Thank you so much, Vibhu. Really glad to be here. Yeah, and glad to join this. Love what you're doing with the show.
Thanks. So we met a couple years ago back when you were uh, kind of making a whole wide range of custom fit, and I remember I had gone through. You had basically what you call a smart fit questionnaire where you guys try to learn about someone's body type and back, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, but you had T-shirts, suits, a whole variety of things that you were manufacturing personalized. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, there's definitely a period of time where we were just trying a lot of different things, and frankly, I think at that point the product assortment was not that cohesive. But yeah, we've definitely had to learn a lot on both the product side and also just how do you get people who've never ordered custom clothing to order custom. So yeah, there's been quite a journey of figuring that out.
And these days, you've really centered on something that's working very well, which is jeans. And tell me about how that's going and how the last year has been for you.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy because we prior to the pandemic, we were actually primarily selling a totally different product. We were selling this thing called Flex Tech, which is basically custom workwear, primarily of a suit that's made with an athleisure fabric. We had launched it on Kickstarter in May 2019. We're growing super fast off of it up through the start of COVID. And then in March last year, March 2020, all of a sudden, we just saw our cost to acquire customers go through the roof. And because so much of the proposition was around travel, people stopped traveling, people returns started pouring in as people said, I no longer need this. And at that point, it was kind of a scary moment because we thought that the growth was unstoppable, kind of naively. And thankfully, we had just launched custom jeans. And, we're kind of a zero inventory business. So thankfully, we weren't sitting on all this inventory around, the Flex Tech product, and we were able to just immediately reorient toward jeans. And it took us a couple months to figure out the marketing, like how to get it to scale on digital. But now we're a custom denim company, which is just wild.
Yeah. So I'm personally surprised by that because, for a lot of the workforce, not a lot, but I actually don't know the percentage, but probably a lot of people have transitioned to working from home, and when you're on a Zoom call, no one can see if you're wearing pants. Um, and so, what is driving, you think, the people's desire for better fitting jeans?
Yeah, I think one is our denim. We use the same mill as Prada and Acne, but we're using this more innovative fabric where it feels incredibly soft and comfortable, but it looks like and feels like regular jeans. And so I think what was happening is part of it is just as the pandemic evolved, people wanted to feel more like themselves, and part of it was to wear jeans that were really comfortable and that they especially I think depending where you were in the country, maybe you could still go out for a meal or, there's still settings where you might want to feel better about how you were dressed. And so I think what we were giving people, one thing I heard that was interesting was people said that during a crisis, you can give people an escape, or you can be a support, or you can give people like a sense of something really special. And so I think for Scene, it was the denim was like this moment of everything else in your life is crazy, but you put this thing on that was made just for you, and it feels comfortable, and you feel a little bit more like yourself, like you have a
Yeah,
little bit of control over everything else that's going on. So that's
makes a
something
ton of
that's
sense. And what about like, I mean, have you seen, I don't know what the average amount of like weight that people gained during the pandemic, but certainly a lot of people, I mean, I don't know if it's the birth of my child or COVID or a combination, definitely gained a bit of weight last year.
Yeah.
How has that affected the business at all?
You know, we use primarily stretchy fabrics.
Mm,
So in that way, that's been quite helpful. So I think why people have liked it is that, especially also for people who, whether it's being at home all the time and putting on a few pounds, or people who are still exercise, especially for people who lift, they tend to fluctuate with weight quite a bit.
right,
Uh,
right.
so we try to we're using this balancing act of doing custom fit, but then we're using materials that have a lot of give so that you can actually fluctuate a little bit in weight and the fit is.
Interesting, interesting. And so tell me, what does custom fit exactly mean? Like, walk me through the customer journey, and then even like what happens behind the scenes after an order is placed.
Yeah. So, normally when you think about custom fit, you're thinking a suit for a wedding or a black tie event. And you typically go into this tailor shop there's a couple of associations, right? Like one is a retail store, you have an hour session, you're drinking whiskey. Another association is the traveling tailor who comes to a hotel, once a quarter, and then you can order a bunch of dress shirts. And we thought that, and I think those are great experiences, but we wanted to do something that was more like everyday custom. And then for that, people don't necessarily want to travel somewhere to get sized or to have it be this whole process. You want it to be easy, right? So we thought about actually the only way to get people to start to consider buying everyday items that are custom fit is you have to make it so simple that the test for us was the Netflix test, which is, can you be watching Netflix and drinking wine and order a piece of custom clothing without having to get up? And then we had seen companies like Stitch Fix achieve a lot of scale doing that. So that was actually like huge, probably one of the biggest insights for us as a business after years of like trying everything else. And so that's what that ended up being like the final version of SmartFit, where it takes about 60 seconds. You don't need a measuring tape. You're just answering information that you already have, which is like, this is my height, this is my weight. I typically wear these sizes. I like for my clothes to fit a certain way. And then we use that to generate not just your body measurements, but more importantly, we generate the final technical spec for the garment. That's then laser cut, hand assembled. It's delivered in about 2 weeks. And then everything comes with a 60-day guarantee, which includes like unlimited remakes and alterations. And it's all about basically creating a digital fit library of your favorite fits that you can then go back to and order.
So, where are your products actually made?
Yeah, so right now, all our materials are from Japan, and then the cut and sew is in China. And then within next year, we're going to actually do our first manufacturing pilot here in Los Angeles. So then we'll continue to actually do more stuff domestically once the pilot is up and running.
So I mean, effectively, all right, let me try to describe the value prop of Sene, which is that custom fit itself, normally people think of it for high-end occasions where they're going to spend a lot of money. And a lot of people like myself do get some certain types of items tailored. Like I get jeans tailored, for example, but it is usually reserved for very expensive, even for expensive items. Like they come in, without they're not pre-tailored, right? So it's the only way to buy them. And so you've basically built a workflow and a supply chain around custom fit, high-end materials, as good as you said, like the same type of materials as Prada uses, but sourcing that, sending that information to your manufacturing partner in China makes it very, very cost effective for people to use this across all of the normal things that they wear, not just that special stuff.
That's spot on.
Right, basically?
That's totally spot on. Yep. And I think we had a discussion early on about this, and I think that the term that we've really landed on to describe it is fast custom. Like it's all about making it super fast, super easy, and of course all the other parts around really like high-end materials and whatnot.
All right, so let's talk about the financial part of this business, because I think, especially on the fundraising side, we've had a couple of conversations. This is kind of how we met, actually, talking about how to raise venture funding for a business like this. And you may know this. I recently announced that I joined a venture fund called Interlace as a part-time partner, and we look at a lot of brands, a lot of tech companies, and there is, truthfully, there's a lot of folks that are doing personalization right now in apparel, and it's a really tough business to fund or to think about funding as a venture person, because it's hard to imagine. I mean, you think even harder than maybe a traditional business where, like you mentioned, you have zero inventory. But I think the benefit is, at least from a Luddite, not a Luddite, but a novice's perspective, that allows you to like probably buy in bulk and kind of produce economics that kind of make sense as you scale. They get better as you scale. But it seems like personalization has like a one-to-one relationship between your expenses and your revenues. So tell me about how you thought about raising capital and how your business is structured to be kind of more scalable in that sense.
Yeah. Well, we've definitely had a hard journey with raising money, and I think in some ways it's ended up being a blessing in disguise, because I think we had tried raising money before we created SmartFit and created like a current assortment of products, and I think if we had raised money earlier, we probably would have had committed to going down a certain route that actually wasn't the right ultimate model. And so I think there were a couple times where we tried to raise money, it didn't work out, and it forced us to like actually refine the service model. And I think, to your point, the challenge of scaling personalization, there's a lot of dead bodies in this world, because there's a bunch of companies that have tried to go after this. A lot have either gone out of business or have had really poor exits. And then you have, bigger ones that have a decent amount of cash, but they're sort of like the Walking Dead too. So certainly a very difficult space. And I think the difficulty in raising money has ended up forcing us to focus and to really focus on the customer. And now I think what's been kind of interesting about where we've gotten to and then where we're going with this is that I think it's by not having enough cash, it's actually forced us to build a model I think that actually can scale more quickly than what we originally had in mind. Because with SmartFit, what's kind of interesting is traditionally the sizing process is super manual, right? And then the process of using tailor, and like the Indochinos of the world are still doing that. There's a couple companies doing body scanning, but the adoption for body scanning is pretty bad. So I think the SmartFit allows us to automate that whole process. Then in terms of the pattern creation, what's shocking is that there's no one right now who is automating the creation of the technical spec. Even like the trunk clubs of the world, when they have their.
So you have to explain what that is. I don't know what a technical spec is.
Oh yeah. So getting to body measurements is actually it's not simple, but that's the simpler part of the problem that you're trying to solve. The harder part is figuring out a fit that someone really wants, because that's highly subjective. It's art and science. And so what has happened for 99.9% of everyone who's tried to go into this space is that they only create body measurements, whether that's through a tape measure or through some sort of like sizing algorithm or body scanning, but they're handing over the pattern creation responsibility or the size or the fit creation responsibility to the manufacturer. And so they're like, here are the body measurements, here's some of the preference indications they've indicated, like I want it slim fit, I don't want any break in my pants. But the manufacturer is actually creating this is the actual out seam, this is the inseam, this is the hip width. The problem is it locks you into the manufacturer, and then once you start having like a distributed manufacturing network, it's highly inconsistent because you don't have all the fit data, and then you also can't learn, right? The algorithm can't improve because you don't have the specs. So what we're doing is we actually generate the spec and we give it to the manufacturer to make it according to our spec, and then we're able to do a ton of learning on top of it. And
so that's all algorithmic. So once we've put in the information in the questionnaire, you're outputting this based on your data, and then that model is saved per customer and tweaked over time?
That's exactly right. Exactly. So we're able to learn for the customer, but we're also able to learn like at a more macro lens across like our customer database, which has been really huge for us. So because of that, a year ago our return rate was like around 20% for apparel items, and now we're about 12% in terms
Very
of
nice.
return rates. And then,
Yeah, that's
like
huge.
for apparel, that's like 30, 35%. So
Right.
we're actually expecting to continue to drive that down as the algorithm learns and gets better. So that's sort of like on the scaling side. And then once we bring our manufacturing in-house, the economics of the business will actually be the same. Like we get all the benefits of the economies of scale, like any standard size company, because the most difficult parts will be automated, like the pattern creation and the like the sizing and the technical spec creation are all automated through SmartFit. We can laser cut the pattern based on the output of the SmartFit. Then the rest is just cut and sew, right? Which is just like normal manufacturing.
Got it.
So that's been kind of interesting. Like through the like to date, we've raised about 500K, and I think because we had a hard time raising, it actually forced us to have to automate a bunch of things.
Yeah,
We
makes sense.
you know, having a lot of things.
Yeah, I share. I mean, I think we've raised a lot of money at Beta, but the hardest rounds for sure is when we learn the most in our business adaptive. Because I think, frankly, like if you show this to 50 or 100 investors, like I have, I'm sure you have, maybe, probably, to be honest with you, a lot more than that over time. Um, there's good and bad feedback from them, but I think overall, if you're getting a lot of sway one way, there is something that can be adjusted. Sometimes it's the business, sometimes it's the way you're talking about it, but there's always something to learn from a difficult fundraise for sure. And the insight you just delivered to me kind of I had not thought about before, which is that just getting the body measurements isn't enough because people will feel different. Like we're not looking for a shirt that's completely fit to my body. I want something that I enjoy wearing, and like what is the thing that people get the most wrong about what they think they want and how their clothes fit, but what your data actually shows.
Yeah. Well, I think it's more to your point. The biggest issue is just you have to you need to ask the least amount of questions to get the most accurate picture of preference, right? So I think it's sort of a larger question around how you show. It's about surfacing content and questions all at the right points so that it feels really easy and kind of fun for them to transact. Now, yeah, I think in the early days, we thought that we needed to dictate what a good fit is. But especially with, I think right now there's a whole debate on like Gen Z versus millennials on jeans and how jeans should fit. And, like the mom jean and boyfriend jeans are super popular right now. And so for us, it's actually about just taking a step back and saying, hey, like, there's no such thing as a perfect fit. It's all about a fit that makes you feel good about yourself. And, if we ask you a question around the shape of your rear and like how your stomach is, and then you like things to be a certain, like you like a high rise, we can actually we start to know, actually, if we matrix a bunch of information together, we're like, okay, actually, you like this type of fit, and it needs to actually be this much higher of a rise because you probably want to like have it above your belly button. So it's I think it's we're all about just stepping back and giving the person control in terms of the right fit, but still it's still important, I think, in this space to be a brand. Like it's not about you still need to kind of like provide stuff that's aspirational and interesting, create looks for people, and just take away the barriers right now where they can't get certain looks. Because someone might be like, oh, I have this body shape, I really like that look. Normally it's really hard for me to get that look. And so we want to kind of easy.
And so tell me, what is your brand? How you built it, and what would people, tell me about it.
Yeah. So one thing is that we felt like it was really important for Sene not to be primarily about fit. Like we're not a like size inclusivity is a huge part of what we do, but it's not the brand. The brand is all, the brand idea is cut your path. So it's all about a brand that's for, like, the persona is all about entrepreneurs and creatives and people who are making their own way. They're not following the conventional wisdom, and they've done something totally new. They break the rules. And then here we cut clothes that are also from scratch to reflect like who they are, keeps up with their journey. And it's all about like really thoughtful design, really great materials, and like super easy service. So that's sort of the brand layer. And then we create products with very specific propositions for like a given category. So like the athleisure workwear, that's like a specific category proposition. Our super comfy stretch denim is like a denim proposition. But yeah, it was important for the brand level not to be this brand that's just about, oh, we do all sizes. It has to be like a deeper, it was important for it to have some sort of soul to it.
Right. And so let's dive into a bit about the journey too, because so you founded this in 2016 with your cousin who is still with the business today. Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned as well that it was kind of all hands on deck when you were building this. Even your wife was helping out quite a lot in the early days. But like, what did you came from management consulting, I believe, and branding work. What things did you get wrong about, or what did you think was going to happen, and when you founded the company, and what has been easier, what has been more difficult? What have you learned?
Yeah. Well, I think initially in 2016 when it started, it was really just a nights and weekends project, and it was a totally different business. We had a different name. It was called Suitable at the time. And it was just something that I thought was fun. It was an outlet because right before I started Sene, I was doing brand consulting. And so I felt like it was a creative outlet for this. I wasn't really that interested in being an entrepreneur even. And I just thought this was like I think that the intellectual question of how do you mainstream custom was really interesting. And so
were you buying custom prior to building this company?
So yeah, great question. So I had a client called Qualcomm, based out of San Diego, and I was leading a global rebrand for them. And so I was doing these workshops in Europe and in Asia. I spent a weekend in Shanghai. A buddy of mine was like, "Hey, let's go get some custom suits made at the fabric market." So we went.
Yeah, that's what you do. You go to Hong Kong, same thing.
Exactly. And there was this moment where he was like, "Ray, I have no idea what to make." They were opening up all the fabric books, and they were all at different price points, but the fabrics all look the same. And he was like, "I don't know what to choose." And I thought that was interesting. Where why is everything that's custom fit also, custom design? And why can't you just have just custom fit? Like reduce the amount of choice. And so that was the initial idea of like, oh, that's interesting. There's too much choice. But the fit part is a true pain point. But I don't know that everyone wants to design their own garments. So what was interesting was I kind of thought that was the insight. And then we're just going to grow. But I think the journey has been a lot of peeling back the layers and realizing that, beneath the insight is another insight and another insight. And we had to go really, really deep in before we got to something that could scale. I think that was the first couple of years. We were still primarily selling products that were already custom made. Like we were doing dress shirts, we were doing like wool suits. And we thought that the proposition at the top level in terms of the design collection was enough. And the two problems that we didn't solve until about a year and a half ago, which is when we totally redid the entire business and then things started moving really quickly. But it took us a while to get there was we had an inkling that design really mattered. We had an inkling that you had to make it simple. So we kind of knew that, but it wasn't. I think we opened a retail store in LA actually that was just a nightmare. It was pretty difficult, and we kind of made the wrong call in terms of where we placed it to, and so I ended up just feeling like I was running this small business with a retail store, and that it had no signs of exponential growth. We're just kind of growing at a reasonable clip. And so we had to take a step back and just say, we even though this is the thing that's generating the most cash, we kind of need to kill it if we want to try to go after the big idea. And we also realized we had to get rid of most of our products because it was just not differentiated enough. So that was a scary moment, which is get rid of the thing that's generating the most cash, get rid of all the products that we were selling, and try to focus in on making something that we really felt like deserved to exist. Like it was so unique that it was really the best thing that we could make. Whereas we were looking at a lot of our stuff and we're like, this is fine, people like it, but it's not that interesting. And then I think I was in New York for a weekend. I was visiting my family because my family's on Long Island. And then I saw a lot of guys who were wearing the ABC cap from Lululemon. And then I was like, well, that would be really interesting if it was a suit and it was custom. So that was one initial inkling for what ended up being Flex Tech. And then there was also, I had seen, I'd like gotten to know some of the folks from Stitch Fix, heard that one of their challenges, especially in their early days, is just deploying half of their capital they were raising to inventory and then being constrained by the amount of sizes that they carried. And I thought, well, that's interesting that they're using a quiz. 100% of people who are using Stitch Fix are taking a quiz. What if we could combine a quiz with a very distinctive product approach? Get rid of most of our products. Because usually with custom, you offer like a bajillion options. We thought, what if we offered very, very, very few options? And then we had a quiz. And then when we combined those two things, the business really took off. It took us a while to get there, about 3.5 years.
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot of founders, they start, and we've done this too in some ways. You start with a product, you have an insight, kind of drives that initial like inspiration to start the company, and then like if it doesn't take off, and there are very few businesses that like immediately explode and sustain that for a long enough time, where as an entrepreneur you're like, okay, we got to keep investing here, where you're kind of pulled by your customers. That's just probably like 0.1% of small businesses, right? Most of us, there's some traction because you can call your friends and your friends will call their friends, and eventually you kind of build a little bit of an audience. But then you start thinking, well, what if we built this other thing? What if we built this other thing? We're missing products. We're missing more stuff to offer, because that's why it's not growing. If we just had more things, then we'd be growing faster. So a lot of and again, you'll kind of proliferate, and and again, you'll find growth there. But if you haven't deeply had that conversation with yourself that it sounds like you had about, do all these things that deserve to exist? I think that's such a beautiful way of phrasing that. I think many people kind of collapse back in and okay, let's get back to basics. What is it about? Why did we start this? And you learn. I think you apply those learnings, and you revisit your insight that you had from long ago, and you see it in a new way. And hopefully, Beta is also going through that right now. We're like video. We're doing this interview on Beta TV, and we'll announce more soon. But video is a huge part of our future. We're pretty much we're all in on video, as we'll talk about. But tell me, I mean, this is kind of our last question. But you talked about peeling back the layers. What have you learned about yourself over the last 5 years?
Yeah, I think I've learned a couple of things. I think one is that the initial conviction was right, but the execution was wrong. And so a lot of times you have to separate those two things, that you can have an inkling or a vision or a belief that could be right, but you can't be too stuck in the way that you're executing it. And it took me a while to realize that, and that you sometimes have to, I can't think of a more PC way to say it, but you have to kill the things you love in order to like really get to it. Good things can really stand in the way of doing something really great. And it took us a while to go through. I think I had a lot of pride around what we had built already. And it took me a while to face that this just wasn't going to get us there. And that if we really wanted to get there, we would have to get rid of things that seem to be working to some degree, and strip away the things that were sort of part of my identity, and to be okay with that. And so I think I've gone from being, I think so. So through the journey, I feel like now I appreciate the journey of building way more, and I'm super grateful for, I think the privilege to get to do this and to continue to learn along the way. I think I've embraced learning, because I think once I started embracing learning and progress, that allowed me to make some of the hard decisions I needed to. So yeah,
I love that. So Ray, I could talk to you all day, and I'll have to have you back on another year to hear another update on how it's going. But let's wrap up another amazing episode of Founder Exchange. Thank you so much to our guest Ray, and we'll see you again next week.